It's wonderful to be learning together with all of you as we approach Rosh Hashanah, and we're in that week of lead up of Slichot leading into it. So really, I think I'm in the mind frame to start reflecting on these things, and I hope you are as well. What we're going to be looking at today is actually quite appropriate in terms of, if I didn't say and you don't know, I'm Rabbi Dov Linzer. I'm the Rosh HaYeshiva and president of Yeshivat Chovei Torah Rabbinical School that's housed in this building. And many, if not all of you, I already know. So actually, the topic I'm going to be talking about today is quite appropriate to what has been going on in the world, and that is the theme of Malchus, of kingship. And to what degree the concept of Malchus, Malkhuyot, one of the three main parts of the Shmona Esrei, Musaf Shmona Esrei of Rosh Hashanah, is Malkhuyot really a central theme? Is it the most important of the themes? Is it maybe equivalent to the others? Or maybe, shocking possibility, it really is a completely secondary, in parentheses, not really a theme at all. So we really are going to see a range of possibilities, and I certainly have been reflecting, as I think the whole world has been, about what does, with the passing of Queen Elizabeth, and my son got up at 6 a.m. this morning to watch the beginning of it, but I put him right back to sleep. It's about a 3-hour, 4-hour process till they actually get to the actual funeral itself. But anyway, what did it mean? What does it mean to have a king, a queen, and what will it mean now as it passes to a very different type of a person? Is this something that's outdated, out of fashion? Does it do something for us as a people? Did it do something for the British people to have Queen Elizabeth for 7 decades as their queen? So these are questions I think that are being asked, and I think that they are questions that I will turn a little bit towards ourselves, because about how these themes resonate for us personally. When we do the Malkhuyot part of the Shmona Esrei, metaphors work if you relate to them, right? So if we were living in a society in which you had an all-powerful king who was the ruler of the society, or a queen, right? And you said God is Melech, that would evoke a lot, not just intellectually, but in a deep sort of visceral, emotional way. How does it play out for us? That we, and the fact that is not a live part of our lives, is a living part of our lives, is I think also a really important question to be asking. So with that, we're going to turn to people. I assume people have source sheets. Yes, no, yes. Okay. Yep. The sources that I've put together, and we'll start with the psukim that actually deal with Rosh Hashanah itself, and that is twice. It's never called Rosh Hashanah in the Torah. And you have here in the first source in Vayikra and Emor, Darber b'nei Yisrael Emor b'chodesh hashvi'i b'chad chodesh yelachem shavaton Zichron Trua Mikra Kodesh. Okay, on the first day of the 7th month, a day of rest, a remembrance of a blast, a holy day. And the next pasuk in Bamidbar is not, in Pinchas is not that much more clarifying. Yom Truah Yihiyeh Lachem. Supposed to Zichron Trua, it's a Yom Truah. And what is really sort of shocking when you realize it is that how completely undefined the idea of shofar and even the idea of Rosh Hashanah itself is in the Torah. Not only does it not have a name, right? It isn't without a name, it doesn't even have an identity. It wouldn't matter what the name is. A name gives something a real, first thing Adam did was he named the animals. I mean, things that are unnamed are a little not really there, right? It doesn't even have a name, and we don't know what its purpose is. What is this day about? And while it does mention Truah, it doesn't mention shofar, that you do a Truah with a shofar, and you can do it with a trumpet, and it doesn't tell you what the purpose of the Truah is. Beyond that, it doesn't even tell you how to conceptualize what Yom Truah and Zichron Truah means. There's a famous debate in the poskim, going back to the Rishonim, What is the mitzvah of shofar on Rosh Hashanah? Is it a mitzvah to blow the shofar or to hear the shofar? And that affects whether we make the bracha lishmoa kol shofar or al tkiyat shofar. We make the bracha lishmoa. Could give a whole shir on that. But one of the reasons, or I would say the starting reason why we're able to have that debate is because the Torah doesn't tell us clearly what we're supposed to be doing, right? It doesn't say make a, do a blast, hear a blast. There's no verb here. Zichron trua, yihyeh lachem. The best verb you have is it shall be, right? So this is a complete blank slate, actually, about the nature of the day and the nature of shofar, what they're supposed to symbolize, what even the mitzvah of shofar is. And it's my contention that is a major function of Malkhuyot, Zichronos, and Shofros. On the one hand, Malkhuyot, Zichronos, and Shofros come together with the Tkiyat Shofar, and coming there, they can be understood to be giving some sense of definition, symbolism. If you're saying all these psukim before you blow the shofar, it is perhaps saying something about what the Tkiyas shofar is supposed to be about. It also is possibly saying something about what the whole day of Rosh Hashanah is supposed to be about. Now, if Malkhuyot, Zichronos, and Shofros were telling us something about the whole day of Rosh Hashanah, then, and the nature of that day, these themes of kingship, remembrance, shofar, if it was there to help clarify the very nature of the day, you would expect us to say it when? Just on Musaf of Rosh Hashanah? If it was defining the very nature of the day, presumably we should be saying it. Yeah, in Kedushat Hayom, or all three of them maybe, and we should say it in every Shmona Esrei. Why just say it on Musaf? So the Baal Amur, Reb Zrachi Alevi, 12th century Provence, he says that's absolutely correct. You have to say Malchus, Zichronos, and Shofros in every Shmona Esrei on Rosh Hashanah. So for those for whom Rosh Hashanah davening was not long enough, okay, you don't blow the shofar the other Shmona Esreis, but say Malchus, Zichronos, and Shofros. That is about defining the very nature of the day. When it comes that we limit it into Musaf, can be understood in one of two ways. It could be that even that is still about the nature of the day, but Musaf, Musaf is the Korban Hayom. Musaf is the Shmona Esrei that represents the sacrifice that defines, the psukim we just read, our psukim about a Korban Musaf. That is the identity of the day. So it could very well be that it is about the identity of the whole day, but we're still focusing it on Musaf. It could be also that it is more likely, because we blow shofar with each one, that it's there to help give meaning and frame the mitzvah of Tkiyat shofar. But to the degree that the day is about the shofar, it might all be the same, right? If this is telling you what the shofar is about and the day is Yom Truah. So those are, I think, the one way or the other, this is what I think the rabbis were doing, Chazal were doing, when they instituted Malchuyot, Zichronos, and Shofros. They said, we have a day here and a shofar that lack definition, that lack identity. What are we going to do to give it some meaning, to clarify what it's about? Let's do these psukim, and obviously one pasuk here, we're going to tie it. It says Zichron, it says Trua, Malchios, we're going to get to. Let's try to give it, quote psukim to give it some framing and give some identity to shofar and maybe some identity to the whole day. So I think it's important just to pause and appreciate how important that function is. Recognizing that, it's going to be really shocking, I think, it was shocking for me when I realized this, to see how Malchios might be a late arrival to the party in terms of the theme of the day. Because if you take a look at the psukim we just read, you have the word Trua mentioned, you have the word Zichron mentioned, but you don't have any sense of Malchus mentioned. That's not there. And that probably is what is behind the position of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri in the next source. So this is source number 3 or C. Okay, and this is from a Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah. Seder brachos. How do you do the brachos of Shmona Esrei? Presumably of Musaf. Omer avos gvuros, you say avos, Magen Avraham, gvurot, God's power, mechayei metim, ukdushat Hashem, the holiness, which would normally be El HaKadosh, now it's HaMelech HaKadosh. V'kol Malkhuyot imahem, ve'ino tokeya. But according to this first opinion, which we'll see as Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, you include Malkhuyot in the third bracha. Well, that makes a heck of a lot of sense, because the third bracha is, what did I just say it was? HaMelech HaKadosh. So you're saying God is Melech. Let's say all the psukim in the third bracha. Okay, it makes a heck of a lot of sense. That's what he says. All right, you make it part of HaMelech HaKadosh, and you don't do Tokeya, because you wouldn't have done Tokeya for HaMelech HaKadosh or Magen Avraham. Those are the opening three brachot. Ha'el becomes HaMelech during this period, okay? But it's still the opening section, so you're not going to be Tokeya. Kedushat Hayom, then you say the Kedushat Hayom, right? So which is Mikadesh Amo Yisrael v'Yom HaZikaron, okay? V'Tokeya, and you do the Tkiyot. So Zichronot, V'Tokeya, so the Psukim, and, Zocher HaBrit, and Shofarot, Shomea Kol Turat Amo Yisrael Barachamim, V'Tokeya. I'm sorry, did I skip? I skipped down to Rabbi Akiva, excuse me. Kedushat Tokeya, Zichronot, V'Tokeya, Shofar, V'Tokeya. Divrei Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Okay, so for him, you do not have Shofrot, Malkhuyot connected to the Tkiyot, right? You have them up in the beginning at Melech HaKadosh, where we're mentioning Melech anyway, okay? And the Tkiyot are three things. Kedushat Hayom, right? Mikadesh Amo Yisrael v'Yom HaZikaron. What do you call it? Kedushat Hayom, Shofrot and Zichronot, which actually is exactly what you have in the Psukim, right? What do the Psukim say in Bamidbar? Mikra Kodesh Yelachem. That's Kedushat Hayom. Mikadesh, right? Mikra Kodesh Yelachem. That's Mikra Kodesh. Kom Lechaz V'Dol Yom Truah, Yelachem, and, okay, you do have to add the other one. Fine. Plus Zichron Trua. But in the Psukim, you have Kedushas Hayom, Trua, and Zichron. So he's saying that's the stuff that we're focusing on. That's the theme of the day, not Malchus. Malchus is just like it's Ha'el HaKadosh became HaMelech HaKadosh. Okay? So actually, when you think about it, that's makes shocking sense. Okay, so that's what Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says. Amalei Rabbi Akiva, said Rabbi Akiva, Im eino tokei lemalchios, lama hu maskir? Wait a minute. Then why are we saying all these psukim of Malchios? If you think it is such a secondary theme, or it's not even a theme at all of the day is a day of Zichron, it's a day of Shofar, it's not a day of Malchus, then why are you mentioning it? Okay, say HaMelech HaKadosh, don't say all the psukim. Okay, right? So why are you saying it? So the fact that you're saying it shows that we're owning the fact that this is a theme of the day, and you don't want to just put it in the opening. Ella Omer Avos Gvurus Kedushas Hashem. Okay, so you say the opening three, then the Kolel Malchios in Kedushas Hayom B'Tokeya. Now, why they assume 9, why it have to be 9 brachas and can't be 10 is not our concern. They're figuring out where do we put it, but they're assuming you need to have 9, so you need to double one up. So he says you add Malchios to Kedushat Hayom. So I don't know if people were paying attention. When I was saying the bracha of Kedushat Hayom before, I said, Baruch Ad Hashem, Mekadesh Amo Yisrael, V'Yom HaZikaron. I skipped over a few words. What's the bracha actually that we say? Baruch Atah Hashem, Melech al Kol Haaretz, Mekadesh Amo Yisrael v'Yom HaZikaron. The Melech al Kol Haaretz is Rabbi Akiva. You have to get Malchios, and not only do we say all the psukim that occur in that, bracha, Malchios, so the actual bracha itself is both Melech al Kol Haaretz and Kedushat Hayom. That's what Rabbi Akiva says. Now, actually, what we might have here is two extreme positions, right? You have, because, Malchios could be one of many, one of three, it's equal to the others, or it's a theme, but not the core theme, or the whole focus could be on Malchios. And that seems to be what Rabbi Akiva is saying, because he's putting Malchios, now it might be that was the order and you got to double up, but it sounds like whatever motivated him, at the end of the day, Melech HaKol Haaretz, Mekadesh Amo Yisrael V'Yom HaZikaron, in that bracha, you are combining, right, Kedushas Hayom, the bracha of the day, together with the theme of Malchus. And let's also remember that, the theme of Malchus carries throughout the Aseret Yemei Iyun all the way through Yom Kippur, because we're saying HaMelech HaKadosh, right, throughout that period of time. So Rabbi Akiva takes the opposite extreme, the opposite position, and his position seems to really have won out. Now, it is for that reason that remember I started by saying, do we say these Malchus Zichron and Shofros every Shmoneh Esrei, just Musaf, and so on. So fine, just Musaf. Except when you go to any of the Shmoneh Esreis, other than Musaf, for Rosh Hashanah, this is Yom Kippur, and you go to that middle bracha, what's that middle bracha of Kedushas Hayom in Mariv and Mincha and Shachris? Same bracha, Melech HaKol Haaretz. Mekadesh Yisrael V'Yom HaZikaron. Are you with me here? Meaning, Zichronos and Shofros we're not going to say except Musaf. But because we wove together Malchuyot and Kedushas Hayom, that bracha is repeated in every Shmoneh Esrei, Melech HaKol Haaretz. So Malchus, which could have totally been left at the sidelines, now becomes said every single Shmoneh Esrei with Kedushat Hayom. There's actually a machloket halacha between the Chai Adam and Rav Soloveitchik about what if somebody comes to you and says, Rabbi, I said Mekadesh Amo, it's unlikely this is going to happen because you're taking it from the Siddur, but I said Mekadesh Amo Yisrael V'Yom HaZikaron, but I accidentally skipped over Melech HaKol Haaretz. Do I have to repeat Shmoneh Esrei? I said the bracha, not Musaf, Ma'ariv, Mincha, Shachris, right? I said Mekadesh Amo Yisrael. I said the bracha of Kedushas Hayom. So the Chai Adam said, no, it's just a bracha of Kedushas Hayom. You don't have to repeat Shmoneh Esrei. That's just a holdover from Musaf. And Rav Soloveitchik says, no, the fact that we're saying that bracha in every Shmoneh Esrei shows that we're posketing that Malchus is central to the idea of Kedushat Hayom. So we really have here possibly a opposite extremes in terms of the role of Malchus. So I want to pause here for a little, reflection on this. Actually, maybe even open it for a little feedback on your part. We've pointed out that for Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, his position makes a lot of sense because there's nothing in the psukim that indicate Malchus, as part of the theme. By the way, what I should say is, here's another just totally parenthetical. He does say you had Malchus as part of HaMelech HaKadosh, right? So what do we do in our Shmoneh Esrei, also gets held over for Yom Kippur as well. What do we do? HaMelech HaKadosh is not the simple HaMelech HaKadosh bracha, right? How does the third bracha of Shmoneh Esrei start on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? Right? God, give your fear over all creation. Everybody should see you, should recognize you. The tzaddikim yalozu. What is that? That's Malchuyot. That's what it means to imagine God as Melech HaKol Haaretz. That was Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri's Malchuyot, which had then the psukim that came with it. So he said, and then ended with HaMelech HaKadosh. We have taken the psukim out. We've paskin like Rabbi Akiva, so Malchuyot is here with Kedushas Hayom, okay? But back here, we're left with not just HaMelech HaKadosh, but we're also left with V'chein Tein Pachtecha, which was the Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri's Malchuyot. So now you understand, you weren't, this almost was an aside of here, which was the focus was on Malchuyot, but now you actually understand how our entire structure of Shmoneh Esrei came to be for Rosh Hashanah. Okay? U'v'chein tein pachtecha was the introduction of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri's Malchuyot, Okay, but we don't paskin like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, so we like took out the psukim or whatever, but we still say HaMelech HaKadosh. That's still his bracha. I mean, And then over here, but you have Rabbi Akiva. We're going to have all these psukim and say Melech HaKol Haaretz Mekadesh Yisrael V'Yom HaZikaron, and we've combined Malkhuyot with Kedushas Hayom, and now that bracha is going to carry over into every Shmoneh Esrei of Rosh Hashanah. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri's V'chein Tein Pachtecha and Melech HaKadosh carries over, and Rabbi Akiva's Melech HaKol Haaretz Mekadesh Yisrael also carries over. So Malchus winds up getting like a double emphasis. It gets an emphasis because we basically paskin like Rabbi Akiva, but even Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, who was he was saying, no, it's not really part of the day. Push it up there into HaMelech HaKadosh, leave it in HaMelech HaKadosh. That wound up meaning that now we're going to repeat that every single Shmoneh Esrei, because now we also have that as part of our Shmoneh Esrei. So Malchus really comes very significantly to the fore. Now, one of the reasons that it's interesting to think about, why it's a funny way to phrase the question, but why is it so absent from the psukim, right? I mean, one of the reasons it could be absent is like, okay, maybe it wasn't so much of a theme. But also, it gets to the point I was saying before about the power of metaphor. And metaphors only work when they are something that are, live experiences, something that you can, relate to. Well, we just read recently, right? We did not have in the Parsha, if you will go and you say you want to have a king when you enter into the land, oh, okay, fine, whatever, you can have a king if you must, etc., etc. And the idea of Malchus was like, not so embraced at the outset, and it was historically, really only became a dominant lived experience in the time of David and Shlomo. That was like, how much years was that? That was about 480 till the building of the Beis HaMikdash. Okay, so about 500 years from the time of the Torah till Malchus became a dominant, meaningful theme for the people. And that's why, the rule of Malchus, Zichronos, and Shofros, if people, want to know another part of the structure, is you have 3 psukim from Torah, 3 from Nevi'im, 3 from the Ksuvim, okay? 3, 3, 3, and then you end with a pasuk from the Torah. Now, I don't know if you realized it, but we really had to stretch to find 4 psukim in the Torah that mention Melech. I mean, this was not easy, to the point that, did anybody remember offhand the last pasuk? What? Yes? Shema Yisrael, right? So what are the 3 psukim? I have this in the appendix, source number 6. It's like, V'nemar lo hibi davim b'Yakov lo ra'amal b'Yisrael Hashem elokav imo truat melech bo. So there you have truat melech. V'hibi shurin melech, right? And that's it. Hashem yimloch li'olam v'ed. So you got those 3. Pretty much all of them are in the poetic sections, right? Hashem yimloch. Yeah, they're all interestingly from the poetic parts of the Torah. And then at the last pasuk, Uv'toratcha katuv le'mor, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Like, I don't see the word melech there. You know why? Because there isn't a 4th melech that refers to Hashem in all of Torah. Okay, so that the Chamishei Chumshei Torah. Okay, so this theme really was secondary in the Torah. But Rabbi Akiva, feels, and maybe you could say, look, God being creator of the world, master of the world, maybe the image and the metaphor of Melech, I don't know if Rabbi Akiva would have thought this way historically, but whatever. But you could say, in his name, that maybe that idea hadn't crystallized yet. But of course, the theme of the day is very much, why are we being remembered? It's because it's the day of creation, because we're Omed B'Din. So of course the idea of God as ruler over us, but ultimately for him, that gets articulated as Malchios, and then these psukim, and then that is a central theme for the day. Are you stretching or are you raising your hand? It's okay. So that is that is where we are. So let me just check. What time does anybody know where this is? From when to when? I think I'm doing good for time, right? Oh, we're going to 11. Oh my gosh, I'm doing really good for time for once. Okay, maybe I'll talk a little slower. All right. Anyway, so now that you have that, which is the real framing, towards this. Let's take a look at, and I'm going to circle back to talk about, I want you to start thinking now, and I'll circle back at the end to talk about, how does this work for you? The theme of Malkhuyot, to you, is that a central theme? Is it a central theme of the three? Is that the one you focus on Rosh Hashanah? We have three to think about, right? And also, how does it resonate for you living without, for us Americans living without a king or queen, and what way does it or does it not resonate? Let's take a look at a few more sources to see how this sort of plays out, okay? So we have the following. This is source number 4, the Tosefta of Rosh Hashanah. And here we have the similar debate. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Eliezer Omer. So now it's in the name of Rabbi Eliezer, not Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Shabson, Omer Kedushas Hayom. So, they're quoting from the Pasuk, which is Shabson Zichron Tru'ah. So Shabson is the day of rest. Kedushas Hayom. Zichronot, Tru'ah, Elu Shofarot, Mikra Kodesh Kacheyu. And then you sanctify the day, go home and make Kiddush. Okay, exactly what Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri said, but said even more strongly. If you look at the Psukim, you have those three ideas. Mikra Kodesh, Shabboson, Zichron, Truah. Those are the themes. Don't talk to me about Malchus. Okay? Amalo Rabbi Akiva. Now, interestingly, in this Tosefta, let's see what Rabbi Akiva says. Nomar, Shabboson Shvus. Shekenu pogeh b'shvisa rishona. Why don't you say Shabboson is not about Kedushas Hayom? Say Shabbat, meaning in terms of the brachos, it just means like you rest on this day. So let's really focus the themes on the second, after the idea that it's a day that you rest. Ela zichron, elu zichronot, Truah, elu shofrot, mikra kodesh, elu kedushat hayom. So this is a little bit strange, and I don't want to, it doesn't fit with the previous Rabbi Akiva because there's no Malchuyot, which is our focus. He puts Kedushas Hayom at the end, which we don't do. But what I wanted you to see, without answering those questions, it's strange, like this, how to unpack that. But what I wanted you to see is that neither of them mention Malchuyot. Okay, you have here a Tosefta looking at the Pasuk, trying to sort of focus on the structure of Shemona Esrei, and both of them, Malchus isn't even mentioned because it's clearly not there. All right, so let's now continue and take a look here, turn the page on the Sifra, and now we will have, I think, some more nuance in those positions that do have Malchios as part of the Kedushas Hayom. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Shabson, Kedushas Hayom, Zichron Truah, Zichronot, Truah, Elu Shofarot. So that's the Rabbi Eliezer we saw. No mention of Malchios. But the Sifra, which is the Tanaitic commentary, this is source number 5E, the Tanaitic commentary on Vayikra. Okay, so the first part parallels the Tosefta, but now we're going to have two other opinions that have Malchios and see where they finally get it from. Because that we haven't seen. I've been spending all my time telling you it's not in the Psukim, and we can't even find 4 Psukim. So where are they going to get the Malchios from? Rabbi Akiva and those that follow his position. So Amalo Rabbi Akiva, so Rabbi Akiva contests it. Ella, here's how I read the pasuk: Zichron elu zichronot, Truah zichron truah elu shofarot. Mikra Kodesh, Ze Kedushat Hayom, sanctify the day, okay, or, Mekadesh Shemo Yisrael V'Yom HaZikaron. Okay, so now where's Malchios? Uminayin shekolel ima et ha-Malchiot, where does that come from? Talmud Omar, Hashem Elokeichem b'chodesh hashvi'i. So the pasuk right before that mentions Rosh Hashanah, b'chodesh hashvi'i b'chad l'chodesh, right, says la'ni v'lager tazov otam. It's talking about leaving the sheaf, it's Shavuos. Ani Hashem Elokeichem u'b'chodesh hashvi'i. So, okay, we connect it because it came right at the, juxtaposed to this pasuk about Rosh Hashanah. Now, I want to pause because so the question I'm asking myself now that we see the basic debate, is how central, if Malchios is part of, the major theme, is it equal to the other three? Is it primary? Is it somehow secondary? And we've sort of laid out I think that how by putting it together with Kedushat Hayom, we're really in many ways, you could easily be understood as having the impact of making it the major theme. So that's the question I want to ask as we look at these sources. Okay, so when Rabbi Akiva says, "Uminayin shehi kolel ima et hamalchios," how do I know? The psukim say zichronot, shofrot. How do I know you should include with them the malchios? The suggestion is that malchios is what? Primary, equal, or secondary? How do I know you should also include malchios? What's your gut? What?
You're asking how do we conclude they must be secondary?
Yeah, it sounds like they're secondary. To be kolel will include you. I'm sorry, I have to digress. My two sons are, well, let me start by saying, my two sons, are autistic, and I personally, and through the yeshiva, have been very much at the forefront of advocating for, access and membership in the Jewish community, and the word I would always use would be inclusion, right? Advocate for inclusion. But my wife, Rabbi Dov Linzer, who is much wiser than I am, said, "I hate the word inclusion." And I said, "Why do you hate the word inclusion?" So she said, "Because inclusion means you're fundamentally out. We know what our group is, but we're going to actually be really nice and include you and bring you in." So I said, "Okay, so what word would you say?" She said, "I think I would start with membership. Like we're all members, Let's not exclude anybody." So there you go. That was worth the whole shiur right there. Thank you. So that's what Rabbi Akiva here, it just popped in my head. But how do we know we should include Malchios? Okay, it does not sound like you're treating Malchios as equal. There was actually somebody, one of our students at yeshiva, that sometimes he had some responsibilities and would sometimes come 3-4 minutes late, and we'd be sitting in a circle. And as soon as he came, he would we'll say, "Oh, come, we'll open the circle, we'll bring in a chair." And he was so upset. He said, "I do not want you opening up the circle when I come. The chair should be there." Now he had a reason. Let me say this: he wasn't late irresponsibly. He had things that he need, absolutely obligations that needed to be. He says, "If you really see me as part of you, then you'll have the chair already there." So, all right. Anyway, so good musar, I think. So that's where he starts with, how do you know that you are kolel malchios? But then, by saying that Ani Hashem Elokeichem u'v'chodesh hashvi'i, if the pasuk actually read that way, "I am the Lord your God. On the first month, on the 7th month, on the first day, you shall have a mikvah kodesh. You shall blow the shofar." If it opened with "I am the Lord your God," presumably that would be the major theme of the day. Okay, so the pasuk and the word he uses are a little different. Given what we know of Rabbi Akiva, I would weigh more to the second read, his centralizing of it. Let's take a look at the next one. Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Mal Talmud Lo Omer, V'ayu lachem l'zikaron lifnei Hashem. This is by the trumpets, that you blow the trumpets and they're a remembrance. Lifnei Hashem Elokeichem. She'ein Talmud Lo Omer Ani Hashem Elokeichem. Okay, it's one thing to say that the trumpets are a remembrance, but why does it, by God, but why does it say, "I am the Lord your God"? Why does it repeat it? Elazeh binyan av, this tells you a general principle. Kol makom she'ata omer zichronot, at somech la hamalchiot. Wherever you're going to say zichronot, you have to juxtapose malchios. So, what do you think? How would you vote on this one? Number one, is it one, major, 2, minor, or 3, equivalent? What do you want to say? You're not going to vote.
I was going to say, I think the necessity for the juxtaposition is more compelling.
His read of the psukim rather than Rabbi Akiva's read?
Yeah, the source you just read.
If in one place the Torah associates trua with God and remembering before God, it's not crazy to think that when you're going to be doing a trua and a zikaron through a trua, that it's associated with a sense of being before God. Right, absolutely. You don't have to make meaning it doesn't prove that's what's going on in Rosh Hashanah, but it's like, hey, look, there's another place we make a blast. It speaks about being remembered before God. It emphasizes God as God. So notice God as God becomes kingship. That's the point I was saying before. Ani Hashem Elokeichem all of a sudden becomes Malchus, right? Because that becomes the metaphor that gets, or that becomes the way it gets concretized. But yes, Aaron's point is absolutely correct. If that's in one place, that's associated with Zichron and Trua, it's logic in another, yes. So what would you say in terms of that, in terms of primary, secondary, or equal
Whether
weight?
Malkhuyot is primary, secondary?
Yeah, or equal weight, according to this second opinion.
They're equal because if Rosh Hashanah is Yom HaDin and the Zichron is related to the Din, then the Hashem is the Melech is also the Dayan.
Right, so, right, and to say it based on the text, if it's Zichronot have to be juxtaposed, right? The word with juxtaposed is a stronger word than you should also include, I think, right? So they're juxtaposed, and that is actually somehow saying that's a package with the Zichronot. Zichronot, that's what they're sort of like about, okay? Yes, I'm sorry, did you want to say? No, I thought you had your hand up. Okay, so that's what I would come up. Rabbi Akiva, the language of Kolel pushes one way. The Hashem Elokechem b'chodesh Hashvi pushes the opposite way. But Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, I think, is really sort of seeing it as packaged together. All right. Let's look at I'm trying to sort of just be prioritized here. Yes, let's look at the Sifrei. This is source number 6. This is the Tanaitic work on Bamidbar, where the other place that but this is on with the Chatzotzrot, the trumpet blasts. Okay, it starts with that pasuk. Ani Hashem Elokechem lama nemar. Why? So starting where the previous discussion left off. Levi Omer daber b'nei Yisrael emor b'chodesh hashvi b'chad l'chodesh yelachem shabbaton zichron trua. Aval malchus lo shamanu. I love that. Meaning, I love the sort of honesty about that. You know, the other way it said, okay, here's where I get shofrot and zichrona. Where do I get malchios? Like starts with, of course, there's malchios, but where do I get it from? But like malchus lo shamanu, it's not in that pasuk. Okay, so where are we going to get the idea of malchios? Talmud Lomar, Hashem Elokav imo utruat melech bo, zo shofar umalchut. So this is truat melech, the blast of the, so it is shofar, and the umalchut might be shofar shel malchut, but this is the exact parallel to what we saw in the previous one with the zichronot, right? Zichronot are being remembered before God. That's one way it's packaged. The God, God is God. God is translated God as Melech. That's the package of what Zichronot are about. And here it's part of the package of shofar. What's the shofar? It's a trua. What's a trua? Trua is it's a blast that you do when the king arrives. So it's all about Malchios. So I think those two are very nice, parallel with the last paragraph of the previous one and the first one here. Okay, so now we're going to switch and actually see it in something we have not seen yet. Now, so far what we have seen is Malchios as sent Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, not part of the day, although that backfires. Rabbi Akiva, central, okay, Kedushas Hayom, and maybe the one we mentioned in Kedushas Hayom. So whether he intended it or not, it certainly has that impact of making it the most important. And now we have ways in which it's equal. It sort of packages together. You don't have zichronos without a melech. You don't have shofros without a melech. Those are all part of the same thing. They're implicit. Okay? Let's take a look at now what Rabbi Nassan says. Rabbi Nassan Omer Einot Tzarich. You don't need to go to that pasuk. Sharei kvar nemar utkatem b'chatzotzrot. That's the pasuk by the trumpets that this is based on. Harei shofar. All right, gotta love that. Utchadim b'chatzotzrot, harei shofar. Right, trumpets. That's the shofar. Close enough. V'ayu lachem lezikaron, ze zichron. So that's zichronos. Ani Hashem Elokechem, ze malchus. No, right here in the psukim by Chatzotzrot, if we gloss over the fact that it's a Chatzotzrot and it's not a shofar, and we sort of see it as about things that make these sounds and make truas, you have that sense of Ani Hashem Elokechem, which again, notice, is being automatically read as Malchus. Okay. Im kain, ma ro chachamim lomar malchios tchila, v'achach zichronot v'shofrot. Okay, so why don't we do in the order? The order of Malchus comes last. Why do we do Malchus first? Okay, so that's a really good question, and that's and I'll turn back to that. Let's see what he says. Ella Himlicheu alecha tchila, v'achar kach bakesh milfanav rachamim. Kidesh yizkor shetizacher lo. Ubameh b'shofar shel cherut. Rather, here is why we say it first. Because first you have to make God king, and then you can approach God and do zichronot. Zichronot being understood, remember us litov. It's the asking of, compassion, of forgiveness, right? So first recognize God as king. You can't approach the king if you have not recognized first that God is king, okay? And the way in which you're remembered is with the shofar of cherut, of freedom. And I don't want to, you could look at the last paragraph about, it means like the shofar of redemption, but I don't want to go there now because it'll distract us. But nevertheless, the point is, I recognize God as king. I ask God for forgiveness. And my tool, my way of reaching out to God, right, is through the shofar. So that is the way he conceptualizes those three. So for that, what would you say, according to that, is the theme of the day, according to that last opinion? Malkhuyot zichronos shofar. So are they all equal, or would you pick one in particular that you would say is the theme? First, but what function is it serving? Recognize God as king in order that you may come and ask compassion. And how will you be asking compassion? With the shofar. So what's the focus of what you're doing? What? I would say it's the zichronot. The goal is that God should have compassion on us. What is necessary to do that? First, we have to recognize God before we can approach God. And then we have to have the tool, right, that makes us worthy, that allows us, again, I'm not going to focus on how the shofar does that now, okay, but ultimately it's God, remember us litov, which is a pretty reasonable thing to focus on this day, very concrete, okay, so that, for him, recognizing that Malchus comes later and actually sort of putting it as a necessary lead-up and a real focus on Zichron as the central aspect of it. So there are actually other places. You know what? I'm actually going to skip because it's too many sources, and I want to actually skip to source number 9, which is a slight variation of this in the name of Rabbi Akiva, and a very tiny change of wording, I think, makes a big difference. So this is a Tosefta of Rosh Hashanah. This is sort of looking at all of the rituals of the various Yomim Tovim. Why do we bring the wheat on Shavuos? So it should be good for, for the crops and so on. And then we get to Rosh Hashanah. So Amar Rabbi Akiva, this is again source number 9, Tosefta Rosh Hashanah. Amar Torah, Havei Omer Sorim B'Pesach, bring the Omer of barley on Pesach, Shehi, that should probably be, or Shehu, Perek Sorin, Kadesh Tivarach Lechem Tvua, that it should be blessed the grain. And then he goes through all of the Yomim Tovim. Then he says, Imru Lefanav Malchuyot Zichronos v'Shofrot. Say before God Malchuyot Zichronos and Shofros. Malchuyos Kadesh Tamlichuhu Aleihem. Malchuyos, in order to make God king over you. Zichronot kidei she'yavo zichronechem l'tova lefanav. Zichronot, to be remembered by God. Shofrot kidei she'talat tfilatchem b'tshua lefanav. Your prayers should go up. So not that shofrot are the tool for your remembrance. Shofrot and zichronot are pretty parallel. Your remembrance and your prayers go to God. Okay, so those two are pretty parallel. Is Malchuyos here the same thing we said before? Before we said, saying Malchuyos in order that you should first make God a king over you and then approach God. Is that what Rabbi Akiva said? In order to approach God for the Zichronot, you first have to make God a king. Yes?
He doesn't say it. I guess he decided if it's first or not, it's first.
What?
I guess you have to decide whether it's implicit because it's first. But it doesn't.
Right. Well, I guess here would be my question. According to the first thing we read, if you weren't going to do Zichronot, there would be no purpose of Malchuyos. Malchuyot was you have to recognize God as king if you want to be able to do zichronos. That's like the entrance fee, okay? That lets you step in the door. If you weren't going to do zichronos, there'd be no purpose. Is that what Rabbi Akiva is saying? Is Rabbi Akiva saying that Malchuyot is to make it possible for you to do zichronos?
No, what he's saying here is compared to in the Mishnah is with Malkhuyot we are to be making him king.
Right, shetamlichu alehem, make him king over you. That is, per se significance. I mean, that's what you'll hear in a lot of sermons this Rosh Hashanah, right? Today is Coronation Day. Today we recognize God as king. The theme of the day is we're announcing, recognizing. It has nothing to do with zichronos and shofros. I don't care if you even say zichronos and shofros. Melech hakol haaretz, that's what the day is about, right? It is about recognizing God as king is central. It's actually fascinating if you look at the other manuscript versions. They're not make God king over you, but make God king al kol ma'asav, on all of God's creatures, or al ma'aseh yadav. And that is the question of whether we are looking at it as a universal day, right? Every human being, everybody passes before God. Is it the day for the world? Or are we sort of focusing on, God as our God? It's like Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Like we recognize, the first, thing we can do is recognize amongst ourselves and announce that God is God, right? But ultimately with a vision, if you take a look, that's what the Malchuyot is and V'chein tein pachtucha is. It's like the ultimate vision that God, Vayah Hashem lemelech al kol haaretz. Okay? There's actually a narrative. I'm going to step back here, and this is really important, that tend to be, shofros not, because there's too many different meanings of shofros, but in Malchuyot and Zichronos, there's like a narrative of the quoting of the psukim. They're not just random quoting of the psukim, right? And it's actually quite fascinating because, it's Torah, Nevi'im, Ksuvim, 3 from each, but the order we quote the psukim is Torah, Ksuvim, Nevi'im. Oh, yeah. Why is that? I never found a good explanation, so here's my explanation, which I'm partial to, which is that the psukim from Nevi'im are future-oriented. The psukim from Nevi'im are all like the Nevi'im looking into the future, looking into the Messianic times, right? The psukim from the Ksuvim and the Torah are sort of like past or present. So like Noach is the past, right, the Zicharon, and then, and then God, but then ultimately, and that's the sort of the narrative arc you'll see, not so much in Shofros, but you'll see in Malchuyot and Zichronos, of past, present, future, we envision. So Malchuyot of Rosh Hashanah, God is the Melech al kol haaretz, but it's also, we are the ones now recognizing God, and ultimately make God, through your shofar blast, through your saying of Malchuyot, announce God, recognize God as king. Okay, so there is pretty much the taking out of that one word, tchila, first make him king so that you can say Zichronos, and just saying first make him king, period, full stop, right? There is a value that is so central, first make God king, full stop. So what we have right now is, and it is the following, is we've seen how, first of all, how our Shmona Esrei sort of got to where it is, because Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri said Malchuyot is not part of it. Look at the psukim. Malchuyot is not there. Okay, maybe it's some general framing, Melech, whatever, HaMelech HaKadosh, but Malchuyot isn't there. So if you want to say the psukim, maybe I can't resist that or whatever. Fine, we'll put it all in HaMelech HaKadosh. Thanks to that, now we have, I shouldn't say it that way, but as a result of that, we have V'chein tein pachtucha, which now we have in every Shmona Esrei, and on Yom Kippur, because he put Malchuyot there in HaMelech HaKadosh. Rabbi Akiva, for some reason, you don't want to have 4 brachos, so combines Malchuyot with Kedushas Hayom. For him, the result is, whatever his intention is, the result, and it certainly seems from the Rabbi Akiva we just read, is that Malchuyot is central to the theme of the most important thing, Melech HaKol Haaretz, the Kadesh Yisrael V'Yom HaZikaron, and that bracha carries out through all the Shemona Esreis. That is the one theme that gets repeated. And HaMelech HaKadosh is the one thing that gets repeated, throughout. So that really comes to the fore. In the other Tanaim, we've seen other framings, like Malkhuyot is an entrance ticket, like you can't step before the king without recognizing God as king, but ultimately it's about praying. Or, the combination, to remember means to be remembered before God. So Zichronot implies and is interwoven with Malchiyos. Or to blow a shofar means to blow a shofar of kingship. So therefore it's interwoven with Malchiyos. So we have those that are interwoven. And we really have, I think, the powerful position of Rabbi Akiva where it stands alone and where it is about recognizing God as king. So what I want to end with is the following, is a little, I think that, I'll just share personally, for many, many years, I don't know if I was more focused on Malchus, but I probably was, but certainly very focused on the theme of Malchus as its whole independent theme. And I was mentioning before the question about about how does that concept of Melech resonate? Like does it work for us? What are the attributes we associate with Malchus? And it's really interesting because, I was mentioning Queen Elizabeth. I was looking at some tshuvot about, do you make a bracha on a president? You make a bracha when you see a king or a queen, right? Which is shachalach michavodo lebasar v'dam. That God, you give from your glory to human beings. Do you make it on a president? On the one hand, he has power. Of course, he doesn't have unilateral power, whatever. I hope still. Anyway, but still could pardon and has enormous power. But he doesn't have the whole, regalia of kingship. And on the other hand, you have constitutional monarchs, which have the whole regalia of the monarchy, but don't really have any power. So which one for that bracha matters? And it's actually interesting that a number of poskim, including Rav Avad Yosef, are much more inclined to say that it's the power that matters, and that you would make a bracha on a president before you would make a bracha on a constitutional monarch. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, I found a tshuva from B'tzel Chochma, which is Rabbi Tzalel Stern, and he in 1949 went to Italy, and in 1954 he was the rabbi of Melbourne, Australia, and he wrote a tshuva about making a bracha on a queen. I can only imagine, was Queen Elizabeth. And he said, it was funny, the person asking said, because it's usher to look at women, so that's what we should. Anyway, but the more interesting to me is that he takes it completely for granted. Of course you're going to, he doesn't even question it. Of course you're going to make a bracha. I mean, that's Kvod Malchus. So I think those two things about glory and power are really important, how we think about that metaphor and how we think about what it means to make God as king. I will tell you that personally, I would very much, when I was younger, weigh towards the power idea. And it was a very, day of fear and trembling and a very, very heavy, weighty type of a day. I mean, it still is, but I would say not psychologically, in a non-psychologically healthy way. And I think that, at least for me, both recognizing how the role of Malchus has been a nature of a debate, but also that you can think of Malchus in very different ways in terms of what does it mean to make God a melech, does not have to focus on the power. What does it mean to recognize God, in our lives as a type of a benevolent monarch, as opposed to a dictatorial one, can make a real difference. So I want to end with a reading of a Sfas Emes that I found that I think speaks to this. And this is the last page, not the last page, because I have all the psukim, but where am I? Hold on. Here. Okay, no, wait, where am I? The people, I'll just take this. Can't find it. These pages are so thick. Okay, are we over? We're over, are we? Okay, all right, we have 5 minutes, you'll give me, okay, fine, here we go. So,
the last source here is the Bible.
Oh, they printed off the wrong ones. They printed off all my, okay. Now, I probably wasn't corresponding to all my numbers. Did you guys figure it out? It more or less did? All right. They printed off the wrong source. Anyway, give me 1 minute. I think I can find this. But you don't have this printed. Okay, so I'm just going to read the English for you because of time. You don't have it printed, but I'll make sure they get, we post the right sources. Okay, it says like this. In the Nusach of the Rosh Hashanah prayer, V'chein tein pachtecha, we first articulate God's kingship over the entire world, right? And then we say tein pachtecha, it's about all creatures. And then we say, because of tein kavod, that's v'chein tein pachtecha. Then we move to v'chein tein kavod, Hashem lirei echa, to those who fear you. So he's interpreting that as specifically for Bnei Yisrael. So first we start, to all the world, and then we say v'chein tein kavod, to specifically to Bnei Yisrael. Now he says like this: nowadays we have, we lack God's kingship in the world. We must therefore pray to God to repair the kingship of heaven in the entire world, O Malchus Shemayim, and through this prayer will be realized for us. We pray for the world, and it becomes, it becomes manifest first and foremost for us, Bnei Yisrael. As the rabbi said, whoever is in the need of something and prays for, whoever prays on behalf of his fellow and he is in the need of that thing, he will be answered first. This is what the rabbi, so if I know somebody is sick and I have the same, and I'm also dealing with the same thing, and I pray for them, their refuah shlema, actually the Gemara says I get answered first. So that's a fascinating Gemara. So we pray for the world, that God should be king over the world, but we need that. So we realize it first. This is what the rabbis mean when they say before me Malkhuyot to make me a king over you. Praying with a full heart for God's kingship over all, we merit first to realize the kingship of heaven. The first two, the question of those two different versions, right, in that last source we read, do we say make God king on you or on all of creation? So what the Sfas Emes is saying is we pray for God to be God of all of creation, and that helps make it true for us first. So let me tell you how I interpreted that, personally. You're welcome to interpret that if that's meaningful in a way that's meaningful for you. But when you focus on God as king over the world, remember that's like the ark, that's like in the future, messianic times. So if that is the focus of my prayer, what does a world look like in which God, morality, recognizing everybody's Tselem Elokim, Torah, that is recognized in the whole world. That's God, imagine that, pray for that perfect world. And if you pray for that type of a world, you'll start seeing how somehow it actually starts happening in your own reality. Your own life will change. You'll start doing things, right? If you imagine the world as you want it to be, then you'll start making certain decisions and certain things will start happening that will actually start bringing little bits of that true for yourself. And to me, that is a much more resonant idea of Malchus, at least this stage of my life, where it's, keeping that sense of not God is king and therefore I can get punished and the weight that comes with that, but what does a world look like in which God is recognized, and what is that world that I yearn for and strive for, and what is it I can do in my life to actually take some steps towards that? And I think sometimes that can really actually lead to better tshuva and growth than too much, self-flagellation that sometimes comes from other ways of thinking of the day. So I wish you all a ksiva v'chasima tova and a shana tova, and it was a lot of fun. All the best.